The Boeing 747 sliced through turbulent skies at 37,000 feet when Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the intercom, tension bleeding through his practiced calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an unusual request. If there are any qualified military pilots aboard, please identify yourself to the flight crew immediately." Passengers exchanged nervous glances. Children pressed their faces to windows, searching for answers in the endless blue. Flight attendants moved with urgent precision, their training masks slipping just enough to reveal concern. The aircraft shuddered slightly, not turbulence but something else, something wrong. In row 12, seat C, Commander Zara Ghost Okafor stirred from deep sleep. Her weathered hands instinctively reached for dog tags that weren't there, muscle memory from 15 years flying combat missions over contested airspace. The announcement hadn't fully penetrated her consciousness, but her body knew danger before her mind caught up. Ghost had earned her call sign not through stealth, but through her uncanny ability to appear where enemies least expected and disappear when they thought they had her cornered. 3 tours in hostile territory, 2 silver stars, and a reputation that made seasoned pilots nod with respect. But here, dressed in civilian clothes with her graying hair pulled back, she looked like any other tired passenger heading home. The flight attendant's voice cut sharper now. "We need immediate assistance from any military aviation personnel. Please press your call button if you qualify." Ghost's eyes snapped open fully. Through her window she caught something that made her blood freeze. Far below, barely visible against the ocean's surface, contrails traced perfect geometric patterns, too precise, too coordinated for commercial traffic. Her trained eye recognized the formation instantly. Combat air patrol, military-grade intercept vectors converging on their position. She reached for the call button, then hesitated. The last time she'd identified herself as military, it had been to a review board questioning her judgment during Operation Nightfall. They'd stripped her of command, suggested she'd lost her edge. "Past her prime," one young hotshot had whispered. The recommendation for early retirement had come with full honors and hollow praise. But those contrails below weren't friendly. Whatever was happening up here, commercial aviation protocols wouldn't be enough. Ghost pressed the call button and waited, watching those distant aircraft climb steadily toward their altitude. In the reflection of her window, she caught glimpses of other passengers. A young mother clutching her infant, an elderly man praying quietly, teenagers trying to hide their fear behind bravado. The flight attendant appeared instantly, relief flooding her features when she spotted Ghost's bearing, that unmistakable military posture that never fully disappears, even in civilian clothes. "Ma'am, are you qualified military aviation?" Ghost nodded once, already calculating intercept times and evasive maneuvers. "United States Air Force, 15 years tactical command." She didn't mention the retirement papers in her carry-on or the consulting job waiting in Denver. Some ghosts, it seemed, weren't done flying. The flight attendant's name tag read Jennifer, but her hands shook like those of someone facing their first combat mission. She led Ghost forward through the cabin, past worried faces and muffled conversations. The aircraft's subtle vibrations had changed, not mechanical failure, but the deliberate course adjustments of a crew under pressure. Captain Morrison met them at the cockpit door, his silver hair disheveled and uniform wrinkled. 40 years of commercial flying hadn't prepared him for this. "Commander, thank God, we've got a situation developing fast." His eyes darted to Ghost's civilian attire, doubt flickering across his weathered features. "You are current on tactical procedures." Ghost didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied the cockpit displays over Morrison's shoulder, her trained gaze absorbing airspeed, altitude, heading, and fuel status in seconds. The aircraft was maintaining course toward Denver International, but she could see the tension in First Officer Rodriguez's shoulders as he monitored radio traffic. "Sir, with respect, what's the nature of your emergency?" Ghost's voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to life-or-death decisions. She'd noticed the captain hadn't mentioned her rank correctly, typical civilian confusion between Navy and Air Force insignia systems. Morrison stepped aside, revealing the navigation display. 4 aircraft icons blinked ominously, converging on their position from multiple vectors. These contacts appeared 20 minutes ago. They're not responding to air traffic control, not squawking civilian transponder codes. They're climbing fast and closing distance. Rodriguez glanced back, sweat beading his forehead despite the cockpit's controlled temperature. We tried changing course, but they adjusted to match. It's like they're herding us towards something. Ghost moved closer to the instruments, her practiced eye reading details the civilian crew missed. The intercepting aircraft's climb rate, turning radius and formation discipline screamed military precision. Not Air Force, she'd recognize friendly formations. Not Navy either. The spacing was wrong, the approach vectors too aggressive for standard intercept protocols. "Have you established radio contact?" she asked, already reaching for the communication panel with the confidence of someone who belonged there. "Negative. They're maintaining radio silence across all frequencies." Morrison's voice carried the strain of a man realizing his 40 years of experience might not be enough. "We've declared an emergency with Denver Control, but they're showing the same unknowns on radar." Through the cockpit windows, Ghost could see contrails forming distinct patterns against the deep blue sky. Beautiful and terrifying, like deadly calligraphy written in vapor trails. She'd seen similar formations over the Strait of Hormuz, where unidentified aircraft had tested international boundaries with surgical precision. "Captain, I need to know our fuel status, passenger count, and available diversion airports within 200 nautical miles." Ghost's tone shifted into combat mode, each word precise and purposeful. "And sir, I strongly recommend you let your passengers know we're dealing with unidentified military aircraft." Morrison's face paled. 40 years of routine flights, weather delays, and mechanical issues hadn't prepared him for aerial warfare at commercial altitudes. "Commander, are you saying we're under attack?" Ghost studied the display again, watching those 4 contacts continue their inexorable approach. "I'm saying, Captain, that someone wants our attention badly enough to risk international incident charges. The question is whether they plan to escort us somewhere, or ensure we never arrive at all." The lead interceptor broke radio silence at exactly 14:23 Zulu time, its transmission cutting through static with military precision. "Commercial Flight Delta 849, this is Talon Leader. Reduce altitude to flight level 270 immediately and adjust heading to 090. Acknowledge." Ghost felt ice settle in her stomach. No call sign identification, no national origin, no diplomatic protocols. Professional, anonymous, and absolutely threatening. She reached for the radio before Captain Morrison could respond. "Talon Leader, this is Delta 849. We are a civilian commercial aircraft in international airspace. State your authority and intentions." Her voice carried 15 years of authority, each word chosen for maximum diplomatic impact while revealing nothing about her military background. The response came immediately. "You have 30 seconds to comply or we will consider you a hostile aircraft. Descend now." Morrison looked between Ghost and his instruments, civilian training warring with survival instinct. Lower altitude meant more fuel consumption, reduced options for emergency landing sites, and tacit acceptance of whatever these interceptors planned. Higher altitude offered strategic advantage but risked escalation. "Commander, your recommendation." His whispered question carried the weight of 287 souls aboard. Ghost studied the tactical display, her mind racing through scenarios she'd trained for but never expected to face in civilian airspace. The interceptors had positioned themselves perfectly, too high, too low, boxing them into a tactical envelope with no escape vectors. Professional work, executed with lethal precision. Comply, she said quietly, but declare emergency status with all air traffic control centers. Full transponder identification, passenger manifest, flight plan, everything on record. Rodriguez began the descent, his hands steady despite the circumstances. Through the cockpit windows, the lead interceptor became visible, sleek, angular, unmarked. No national insignia, no identification numbers. Ghost had seen similar aircraft in classified briefings, next-generation fighters that officially didn't exist. The radio crackled again. Adjust heading to 090. Maintain current descent rate. They were being herded southeast, away from major airports and population centers. Ghost pulled out her phone, checking GPS coordinates against her mental map of the region. If these interceptors planned to force them down, they were heading toward increasingly remote territory. "Captain, how long can we maintain current fuel consumption at this altitude?" she asked, keeping her voice level despite growing concern. "Maybe 90 minutes before we reach minimum reserves," Morrison replied, studying fuel flow calculations. "Less if we have to maneuver aggressively." Ghost nodded, her strategic mind already working through possibilities. 90 minutes meant roughly 450 nautical miles at current speed, enough range to reach several potential landing sites, but also enough time for whatever was orchestrating this intercept to achieve their objectives. The interceptors maintained perfect formation, their pilots demonstrating skills that spoke of extensive training and combat experience. No radio chatter, no visible weapon systems, but their mere presence carried implicit threat. Ghost had been on both sides of similar intercepts, shepherding enemy aircraft toward capture or destruction. "Talon leader, request clarification of your intentions," she transmitted, knowing the response would reveal crucial intelligence about their captors. The answer chilled her. "Maintain current heading and altitude. You are now under military escort pending resolution of security concerns. Any deviation from assigned flight path will result in immediate action." At flight level 270, the world looked deceptively peaceful. Sunlight caught the interceptor's canopies like scattered diamonds, while far below, autumn landscape painted Earth in golden hues. Ghost maintained radio watch while Morrison and Rodriguez flew with the careful precision of men walking through a minefield. The lead interceptor had closed to visual range, close enough for Ghost to see pilot movement in the cockpit, close enough to read body language that spoke of professional competence and lethal intent. No wasted motion, no unnecessary communication. These weren't rogue pilots or terrorist sympathizers. This was military-grade precision. "Ghost, you still with us?" The voice on her personal cell phone made her jump. Captain Sarah Phoenix Martinez, her former wingman, now stationed at Peterson Space Force Base. Somehow, word had reached official channels. Ghost cupped the phone, speaking quietly. "Phoenix, how did you? Air Defense tracked your situation 20 minutes ago. We've got F-22s spinning up, but those interceptors aren't showing on our identification systems. What's your tactical assessment?" Through the cockpit window, Ghost watched the lead interceptor's pilot turn toward their aircraft. Even at this distance, she could sense professional evaluation, one warrior sizing up another. 4 unknown aircraft, advanced generation, no national markings. They're herding us southeast, away from populated areas. Professional execution, military discipline. Ghost, listen carefully. These aircraft aren't in any database. Not ours, not allied, not known enemy. Intelligence suggests possible mercenary operation or advanced prototype testing. Either way, you're in deep water. Ghost felt familiar adrenaline surge through her system, the same rush she'd experienced over hostile territory, when split-second decisions meant survival or death. But this time, she carried responsibility for 287 innocent passengers instead of a tactical fighter squadron. "Phoenix, I need options. Fuel status gives us maybe 70 minutes before we're committed to whatever landing site they choose. Working on it, but Ghost, Phoenix's voice dropped to barely above whisper. Word came down from command levels. Officially, you're retired, no longer qualified for tactical authority. But unofficially, you're the only military asset in position to influence this situation. Ghost understood the subtext. Success would be credited to official channels. Failure would fall on the shoulders of a retired pilot who'd exceeded her authority. Political protection for the chain of command, maximum exposure for her. Understood, she replied, ending the call. Captain Morrison had been monitoring her conversation with obvious concern. Commander, are we getting military support? Ghost looked at the interceptors maintaining perfect formation around their aircraft, then at the civilian crew depending on her expertise. Somewhere behind them, 287 passengers trusted their lives to decisions made in this cockpit. Captain, what we're getting is an opportunity to prove that 15 years of combat experience doesn't disappear just because someone signs retirement papers. She moved to the radio controls. But first, let's see if our escorts are willing to negotiate. She keyed the microphone. Talon Leader, this is Commander Zara Akafer, United States Air Force. I request direct communication with your flight commander regarding the safety of civilian passengers aboard this aircraft. The silence stretched for 30 seconds before Talon Leader responded, and Ghost caught something unexpected in the transmission. Surprise. Commander Akafer, confirm your identity and current status. Professional interest had replaced anonymous authority in the interceptor pilot's voice. Ghost realized she'd gained tactical advantage through simple identification. Unknown military personnel commanded more respect than civilian aircraft crews, even among potential adversaries. Talon Leader, I am a retired USAF commander with 15 years tactical fighter experience. I am currently aboard commercial flight as a passenger, but I am willing to discuss resolution of this situation in everyone's best interest. Rodriguez glanced back with newfound respect, while Captain Morrison straightened slightly. The dynamic in the cockpit had shifted subtly, from civilian crew accepting military escort to military professional negotiating with potential adversaries. Commander Akafer, maintain current heading. We will discuss terms in 5 minutes. Ghost used those 5 minutes to study everything visible about the intercepting aircraft. Engine placement suggested high thrust-to-weight ratio. Wing design indicated supercruise capability. Canopy configuration implied advanced avionics systems. Every detail painted a picture of cutting-edge military technology deployed by unknown operators. Her phone buzzed with a text from Phoenix. Intelligence update. These aircraft appeared on satellite imagery 48 hours ago at remote airfield in Nevada. Possible private military contractor testing classified systems. Private military contractors. Ghost had dealt with them before. Former military personnel with advanced equipment and flexible rules of engagement. Dangerous because they combined military competence with corporate objectives, but also potentially reasonable if approached correctly. The radio crackled. Commander Akafer, this is Colonel Hayes, Mission Commander. We need to discuss your aircraft's flight path and passenger manifest. Colonel Hayes. A name, finally, and the rank suggested serious military background. Ghost could work with professional military personnel, even if their current employment raised questions. Colonel Hayes, I'm listening, but understand that I have 287 civilian passengers aboard who are not involved in whatever security concerns prompted this intercept. Understood, Commander. However, our intelligence indicates your aircraft may be carrying sensitive materials that require inspection. We need you to divert to a secure facility for verification. Ghost felt pieces clicking together. Not a random intercept, but a targeted operation based on specific intelligence. Someone believed carried something worth risking international incident to examine. Cargo, a passenger with classified materials, or had she herself somehow triggered this response? Colonel, what specific materials are you concerned about? Commander, I'm not authorized to discuss operational details over open channels. Will you cooperate with diversion to secure inspection? Morrison leaned closer, whispering urgently. Ghost, if we divert from our filed flight plan, we're essentially accepting kidnapping charges against our passengers. Company policy is clear. We don't negotiate with hijackers. But Ghost recognized something in Colonel Hayes' tone that Morrison missed, the careful professionalism of someone operating under legitimate authority, even if that authority remained unclear. Still, 287 passengers trumped protocol. Colonel Hayes, I propose alternative verification. Have your intelligence sources confirm passenger manifest and cargo documentation through official channels. If you find discrepancies, we can discuss further cooperation. Colonel Hayes' response came after exactly 90 seconds, long enough for encrypted consultation with higher authority, short enough to indicate pre-authorized flexibility. Commander Akaffer, we appreciate your cooperation. However, our intelligence indicates a specific passenger aboard your aircraft may be carrying materials classified beyond normal diplomatic channels. Ghost felt ice settle deeper in her chest. A passenger with classified materials meant potential espionage, weapons smuggling, or worse. But it also meant these interceptors had identified a specific threat, not random harassment. Colonel, are you suggesting someone aboard this aircraft poses a security risk? Affirmative. We have reason to believe passenger 23B may be transporting stolen classified documents related to advanced weapons systems. Ghost's mind raced through the passenger manifest she'd glimpsed earlier. Row 23, Seat B. She'd noticed the passenger during boarding, a nervous-looking man in his 50s carrying a briefcase he'd refused to check. Standard business traveler behavior, except for the way he'd gripped that briefcase like it contained his life savings. Colonel, if you have legitimate security concerns about a specific passenger, proper protocol involves coordination with FBI and civilian aviation authorities, not military intercept over international waters. Commander, this situation involves national security implications beyond normal civilian jurisdiction. The materials in question were stolen from a classified defense contractor facility 48 hours ago. Morrison grabbed Ghost's arm, whispering urgently, "If there's really a security threat aboard my aircraft, I need to know immediately. Passenger and crew safety is my responsibility." Ghost understood Morrison's position, but her strategic training recognized broader implications. Military intercept for stolen classified documents suggested either legitimate counterintelligence operations or elaborate justification for less legal activities. Colonel Hayes, I need official authorization codes and confirmation of your authority before agreeing to any deviation from filed flight plan. Her tone carried polite but unmistakable challenge. As I'm sure you understand, military protocol requires verification of command authority. The silence stretched longer this time, nearly 3 minutes. When Hayes responded, his voice carried subtle tension. Commander, we are operating under special authority that I cannot discuss over open channels. However, I can confirm that cooperation will result in safe passage for all passengers except the individual in question. Ghost caught the implication immediately. Cooperation meant surrendering passenger 23B to unknown authorities with questionable legal basis. Refusal meant continued intercept with escalating pressure on 287 innocent people. She looked at Morrison, then at Rodriguez, both watching her with expressions mixing hope and fear. Through the cockpit windows, those 4 interceptors maintained perfect formation, beautiful, deadly, and absolutely committed to their mission. Colonel, I need 5 minutes to consult with the aircraft captain regarding passenger safety procedures. Acknowledged, Commander, 5 minutes. Ghost muted the radio and turned to Morrison. Captain, we need to discuss our options very carefully, and I think we need to have a quiet conversation with the gentleman in seat 23B. Captain Morrison's hands trembled slightly as he activated the cabin intercom, his voice carrying forced calm. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing minor navigation adjustments due to air traffic control requirements. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Ghost studied the passenger manifest on Morrison's tablet, cross-referencing seat assignments with her memory of boarding observations. Passenger 23B, Dr. Marcus Holloway, age 52, traveling alone from Washington Dulles to Denver International. No special service requests, no unusual baggage notifications, but she remembered that death grip on his briefcase. I'll go talk to him, Ghost said quietly. Morrison, maintain current heading and altitude, but start calculating fuel consumption for extended flight time. We may need leverage. She made her way through the cabin, noting passenger anxiety levels. Some dozed fitfully, others stared out windows at their aerial escorts. A few had noticed the interceptors and whispered urgently to traveling companions. So far, no panic, but that could change instantly. Dr. Holloway sat rigid in seat 23B, briefcase clutched on his lap, sweat beading his forehead despite the cabin's comfortable temperature. He looked up as Ghost approached, and she saw the unmistakable expression of someone carrying dangerous secrets. Dr. Holloway, I'm Commander Akafor. May I sit for a moment? His face went pale. Commander, military. Retired Air Force. Dr. Holloway, I need to ask you some questions about your travel today. Ghost settled into the empty seat beside him, noting how he shifted the briefcase away from her. Are you carrying any materials that might be of interest to national security agencies? Holloway's laugh sounded forced. Commander, I'm a theoretical physicist returning from a conference. Nothing but research papers and academic presentations. Ghost studied his micro-expressions, the slight eye movement indicating deception, the defensive posture suggesting guilt, the way his grip tightened on that briefcase when she mentioned security agencies. 15 years of tactical intelligence work had taught her to read people under stress. Doctor, I need you to understand our situation. We're currently being escorted by 4 military aircraft who believe you're carrying stolen classified materials. They've requested permission to inspect your belongings. The briefcase slipped from Holloway's nerveless fingers, hitting the floor with a metallic thud that suggested contents far heavier than academic papers. Other passengers turned at the sound, curiosity replacing boredom. Commander, I can explain. Doctor, explanations can wait. Right now I need to know if you're carrying anything that poses a direct threat to the safety of 287 people aboard this aircraft. Holloway's internal struggle played across his features like a chess match with invisible opponents. Finally, he leaned closer, lowering his voice to barely above whisper. Commander, 3 days ago someone broke into Lockhart Defense Systems and stole prototype specifications for classified weapons systems. I recovered some of those documents. Ghost felt the final pieces clicking into place. Not espionage or weapons smuggling, but recovered classified materials, possibly legitimate, possibly stolen, definitely dangerous enough to justify military intercept. Doctor, are you law enforcement, intelligence services, or did you take these documents without authorization? His silence told her everything she needed to know. Dr. Holloway's confession came in whispered fragments, each word carrying the weight of federal crimes and international consequences. Commander, I worked on those weapons systems. When they were stolen, I knew who had taken them and why. I recovered what I could before they could be sold to foreign interests. Ghost recognized the classic pattern of well-intentioned civilians making catastrophically poor decisions. Holloway had probably justified his actions as patriotic recovery of stolen materials, not realizing that unauthorized possession of classified documents carried identical penalties to original theft. Doctor, did you inform FBI, CIA, or any official agency about your recovery efforts? His head shake confirmed Ghost's worst fears. Amateur-hour operations with professional-level consequences. Holloway was probably telling the truth about his motives, but he'd handled classified materials outside official channels, making him technically a federal fugitive. Show me what you recovered. Holloway hesitated, then opened the briefcase with trembling hands. Inside, Ghost saw a collection of technical documents, computer drives, and what appeared to be prototype components. Even without seeing specific content, she recognized classification markings and handling requirements that screamed national security implications. Doctor, close that immediately. Ghost's command carried enough authority to snap Holloway into instant compliance. How many people know you have these materials? Just me, and apparently whoever sent those fighters to intercept us. Ghost's tactical mind processed implications at light speed. If Holloway was telling the truth, he'd independently recovered stolen classified materials and was transporting them without official authorization. If he was lying, he could be anything from foreign spy to domestic terrorist. Either way, his presence on commercial aircraft had triggered legitimate national security response. She returned to the cockpit, where Morrison waited with barely controlled anxiety. Captain, we have confirmed security concerns regarding passenger 23B. He's carrying classified materials related to weapons systems. Jesus Christ! Morrison's whispered blasphemy carried genuine fear. Ghost, if he's really got classified weapons information, those interceptors aren't going to just let us fly to Denver. Rodriguez looked back from his instruments. Commander, we've got approximately 40 minutes of fuel before we reach minimum reserves for emergency landing. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide soon. Ghost studied the tactical display, noting how their escorts had adjusted formation slightly, still boxing them in, but with subtle positioning changes that suggested preparation for more aggressive action. Colonel Hayes was running out of patience. The radio crackled. Commander Akaffer, time for consultation has expired. We require immediate compliance with diversion orders. Ghost keyed the microphone. Colonel Hayes, we are prepared to discuss terms for resolution. However, I need assurance regarding safety of civilian passengers. Commander, transfer passenger 23B and his materials to our custody, and remaining passengers will be released without further delay. Morrison grabbed Ghost's arm. We can't just hand over a passenger to unmarked military aircraft. Company policy, federal regulations, international law, we'd be accessories to kidnapping. But Ghost heard something in Colonel Hayes' tone that civilian ears missed. The careful professionalism of someone operating under legitimate authority, even if that authority remained classified. Ghost stared at the interceptors through the cockpit windows, their sleek forms cutting through afternoon sky with lethal precision. 40 minutes of fuel remaining, 287 innocent passengers, one civilian carrying stolen classified materials, and 4 unknown military aircraft demanding surrender. The tactical equation seemed simple, except for the human element that made every decision carry moral weight. Colonel Hayes, I need clarification of your authority and jurisdiction before agreeing to passenger transfer. Commander Akaffer, we are operating under emergency national security provisions that authorize immediate action to recover stolen classified materials. Passenger transfer will occur at secure facility with full legal documentation. Emergency national security provisions. Ghost had operated under similar authority during her combat deployments, broad legal protection for actions taken to protect national interests. If Hayes was telling the truth, he had legitimate authority to recover those documents by any means necessary. But if he was lying, she'd be an accessory to kidnapping and theft. Morrison leaned closer. Ghost, I've been flying commercial for 40 years. I've never seen anything like this. My responsibility is to those passengers, all of them. Ghost understood Morrison's position, but her strategic training recognized larger implications. If Dr. Holloway really had recovered stolen weapons system specifications, those documents represented potential threats to national security. But if Colonel Hayes was operating outside legitimate authority, surrendering Holloway could facilitate foreign espionage or worse. She made the tactical decision that would define everything that followed. Colonel Hayes, I propose alternative resolution. Allow us to land at nearest major airport with federal law enforcement presence. Transfer passenger 23B and materials to FBI custody through proper legal channels. The silence stretched 90 seconds, long enough for encrypted consultation with higher authority, long enough for Ghost to watch those interceptors adjust formation with subtle aggression that spoke of growing impatience. Commander Okafor, that proposal is unacceptable. The materials in question require immediate secure handling that civilian law enforcement cannot provide. Ghost felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders like familiar armor. 15 years of tactical decisions, hundreds of missions where split-second judgment meant survival or death. This felt identical, except now her wingmen were civilian aircrew, and her mission involved protecting innocents instead of destroying enemies. Colonel, I understand your security concerns, but I cannot authorize transfer of civilian passengers to unmarked aircraft without proper legal documentation. However, I am willing to personally guarantee security of classified materials until proper transfer arrangements can be made. Morrison stared at her with mixture of admiration and terror. Rodriguez continued flying with mechanical precision, but Ghost could see tension in his shoulders. They were betting 287 lives on her ability to negotiate with unknown military operators. Commander Okafor, you are retired military with no current authority or security clearance. You cannot guarantee anything. Ghost smiled grimly, keying the microphone. Colonel Hayes, I may be retired, but I'm also the only qualified military officer in position to influence this situation. And I'm telling you that those documents will remain secure until proper legal authority takes custody. The lead interceptor broke formation, sliding into close escort position just 50 feet off their starboard wing. Ghost could see the pilot clearly now, aviator sunglasses, oxygen mask, professional competence in every movement. The aircraft itself was a masterpiece of military engineering, sleek and deadly as a hunting falcon. Colonel Hayes' voice carried new edge. Commander Okafor, you are interfering with classified national security operations. Stand down immediately. Ghost studied the interceptor through the cockpit window, noting weapon pylons and advanced avionics that spoke of cutting-edge military technology. But she also noticed something else. The pilot's body language suggested frustration rather than preparation for violence. Professional warriors following orders they questioned rather than believed in. Colonel, I am not interfering with legitimate operations. I am ensuring that constitutional protections for civilian passengers are maintained, while national security concerns are addressed through proper channels. Morrison whispered urgently, Ghost, we're 30 minutes from minimum fuel reserves. Whatever we're going to do. The radio interrupted. This is Denver Air Route Traffic Control. We show you off course with unidentified escort aircraft. State your intentions and emergency status. Ghost felt a surge of relief. Official civilian aviation authority meant witnesses, documentation, and legal protection for whatever decisions followed. She keyed the radio. "Denver Control, this is Commander Acaffer aboard Delta 849. We are being escorted by military aircraft claiming national security authority. Request immediate coordination with federal law enforcement and military command structure. Confirm you are under military escort. Are passengers and crew safe?" Affirmative, Denver Control. Passengers and crew are currently safe. However, we have unresolved jurisdiction questions regarding one passenger carrying sensitive materials. Colonel Hayes' transmission cut across air traffic control frequency. "Denver Control, this is classified military operation under emergency national security provisions. Maintain distance and do not interfere." But Ghost heard something new in Hayes' voice: uncertainty. Official civilian aviation involvement complicated his mission parameters, forcing him to operate under public scrutiny rather than classified secrecy. Denver Control responded with professional calm. "Military aircraft, identify yourself with proper call sign and authorization codes. This is controlled airspace requiring coordination with civilian aviation authority." Ghost smiled grimly. Air traffic controllers dealt with military aircraft daily and knew proper procedures. Hayes could claim emergency authority, but he couldn't ignore federal aviation regulations without serious legal consequences. "Denver Control, we are prepared to land at Denver International for resolution of this situation. Request priority approach and federal law enforcement coordination." Cleared for priority approach. Federal authorities have been notified and will meet your aircraft on arrival. Morrison began descent preparations while Rodriguez calculated approach vectors. Through the cockpit windows, Ghost watched their escorts adjust formation, still maintaining intercept positions, but with subtle changes that suggested preparation for disengagement. Colonel Hayes made one final transmission. "Commander Acaffer, this situation is not resolved. You are making decisions with consequences you cannot understand." Ghost keyed her response. "Colonel, I understand enough, and I'm betting that legitimate authority can resolve this situation better than unmarked military aircraft over civilian airspace." Denver International Airport appeared through broken clouds like a sprawling mechanical ecosystem, runways stretching across prairie landscape with geometric precision. Ghost watched their escort aircraft peel away gradually, maintaining visual contact but creating distance that suggested preparation for rapid departure. Professional military withdrawal, organized, efficient, and ominous in its implications. Captain Morrison handled approach procedures with steady competence, but Ghost could see exhaustion in his movements. 40-year career of routine flights hadn't prepared him for military intercepts and classified document smuggling. Rodriguez monitored communications while coordinating with Denver Tower, his voice carrying relief at returning to familiar civilian aviation protocols. "Cleared to land runway 35L. Federal authorities request you taxi to isolated parking position, Echo 7, for security screening." Ghost felt familiar pre-combat tension building in her chest. Landing meant transition from aerial standoff to ground-based confrontation, where different rules applied and new players entered the game. Dr. Holloway and his briefcase full of classified materials represented unfinished business that wouldn't disappear with touchdown. "Morrison, after we land, nobody deplanes until federal authorities sort this out," she said quietly. "And whatever happens, that briefcase stays in official custody." The landing felt surreal after 40 minutes of tactical maneuvering. Routine touchdown, normal reverse thrust, standard taxi procedures. But through the cockpit windows, Ghost could see federal vehicles surrounding their designated parking position. FBI tactical teams, military police, civilian aviation security, and enough official authority to resolve jurisdictional questions that had complicated their aerial negotiations. As they shut down engines, Ghost's phone buzzed with text from Phoenix. "Ghost, you did good. Intelligence confirms Hayes was operating under legitimate counterintelligence authority, but you forced proper legal procedures. Holloway is cooperative witness, not enemy agent. Documents recovered will prevent major security breach." Relief flooded through Ghost's system like cool water after desert patrol. Her tactical instincts had read the situation correctly. Legitimate national security concerns handled through questionable methods, requiring constitutional protections for civilian passengers while ensuring classified materials remained secure. Federal agents boarded through forward galley, their movements professional but non-threatening. Ghost watched Dr. Holloway surrender his briefcase with obvious relief, his whispered conversation with FBI agents confirming his status as cooperative witness rather than criminal suspect. Commander Okafor, a woman in business suit, approached, FBI credentials visible. "Agent Jennifer Walsh, we need to debrief you regarding this incident." Ghost nodded, gathering her thoughts for official statements that would document today's events for federal records. "Agent Walsh, I assume Dr. Holloway's cooperation resolves the immediate security concerns." "Affirmative. His recovered materials prevented sale of classified weapons specifications to foreign interests. However, your handling of the aerial intercept raises questions about retired military personnel exercising tactical authority." Ghost understood the subtext. Success would be credited to proper federal law enforcement procedures. Her role would be minimized in official reports, protecting institutional authority while acknowledging individual contribution. "Agent Walsh, I was a passenger who provided consultation to civilian aircrew facing unusual circumstances. Nothing more." The FBI agent smiled slightly. "Commander, your service record suggests nothing more constitutes exceptional capability when circumstances require it." 3 hours later, Ghost sat in Denver International's secure conference room, federal coffee growing cold while Agent Walsh completed final paperwork. Through reinforced windows, she could see Delta 849 being serviced for continued flight to its original destination, passengers reboarded and crew preparing for delayed departure. Dr. Holloway had been released after extensive debriefing, his cooperation with federal authorities earning appreciation rather than criminal charges. The classified materials he'd recovered would return to proper security channels, preventing potential espionage that could have compromised national defense systems. Colonel Hayes remained an enigma, legitimate counterintelligence operative, whose aggressive intercept methods had been modified by Ghost's insistence on constitutional protections for civilian passengers. His unmarked aircraft had disappeared after landing, leaving no trace except classified reports that Ghost would never see. "Commander, one final question." Agent Walsh looked up from her documentation. "Would you handle this situation differently if faced with similar circumstances?" Ghost considered carefully. Today's events had required split-second tactical decisions under extreme pressure, balancing national security concerns against civilian passenger safety. Her training had proven invaluable, but her judgment had been questioned by review boards that deemed her past her prime. "Agent Walsh, I'd handle it exactly the same way. Constitutional protections don't disappear during national security emergencies. They become more important." The FBI agent closed her file with decisive snap. "Commander, your actions today prevented potential international incident while ensuring classified materials remained secure. That's textbook crisis management." Ghost felt validation settle in her chest like warm sunlight. 15 years of tactical command hadn't been erased by mandatory retirement or bureaucratic second-guessing. When circumstances demanded military expertise, muscle memory and strategic thinking had proven their worth. Her phone buzzed with message from Captain Morrison. "Ghost, Passengers want to meet the pilot who kept them safe. Interested in quick cabin visit before we continue to Denver." She smiled, remembering faces she'd glimpsed during those tense hours. Young mother with infant, elderly man praying quietly, teenagers hiding fear behind bravado. They trusted their lives to decisions made in Delta 849's cockpit, never knowing how close they'd come to becoming casualties of international espionage. "Agent Walsh, am I free to rejoin my flight?" "Commander, you were always free. You were never officially involved in this operation." The FBI agent's slight smile suggested understanding of bureaucratic realities that minimized individual contribution while maximizing institutional credit. Ghost walked through terminal corridors toward Delta 849, noting how civilian life continued around her with oblivious normalcy. Families greeting arrivals, business travelers checking phones, children pressed against windows watching aircraft operations. The ordinary miracle of commercial aviation, protected by invisible networks of security and dedication that passengers never saw. At the aircraft door, Captain Morrison waited with expression mixing gratitude and newfound respect. "Ghost, I've been flying for 40 years, and I've never seen anything like what you did up there. Professional, calm, absolutely in control." Rodriguez appeared behind him, grinning broadly. "Commander, the passengers are calling you the ghost of Delta 849. Apparently, someone overheard your call sign during radio transmissions." Ghost felt familiar warmth of military camaraderie, the bond forged between warriors who'd faced danger together and emerged victorious. Morrison and Rodriguez weren't military, but they demonstrated courage under pressure that earned respect across service boundaries. "Gentlemen, you handled an impossible situation with exceptional professionalism. I was just the passenger with relevant experience." But Morrison shook his head firmly. "Ghost, you were command authority when we needed it most. Without your tactical expertise, this could have ended very differently." She entered the cabin to spontaneous applause from passengers who'd never learned her real name but understood her role in their survival. The young mother held her infant slightly higher, tears glistening. The elderly man nodded with dignity that spoke of military recognition. Teenagers looked at her with awe usually reserved for celebrity encounters. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ghost said quietly, "you experienced professional aviation crew doing their jobs under unusual circumstances. Captain Morrison and First Officer Rodriguez deserve your appreciation. I was just along for the ride." But she saw something different in their faces now. Not fear or anxiety, but confidence in systems, and people who protected civilian life against threats they'd never imagined. Her actions had reinforced faith in institutions that sometimes seemed distant or ineffective. As Delta 849 lifted off from Denver International 30 minutes behind schedule, Ghost settled back into Seat 12C, with profound exhaustion settling into her bones. The afternoon sun slanted through windows, painting cabin interior in golden light that made ordinary moments seem precious. Around her, passengers dozed or read or worked on laptops, their casual normalcy a testament to crisis resolved and danger past. Her phone displayed 17 missed calls from Phoenix, 12 text messages from former squadron mates, and 6 voicemails from numbers she didn't recognize. Word had spread through military networks with typical efficiency. Retired Commander Zara, Ghost, Okafor had handled aerial intercept of civilian aircraft carrying classified materials. The story would grow with each telling, becoming legend among pilots who understood the complexities of tactical decision-making under pressure. But Ghost felt something deeper than professional satisfaction. Today's events had proven that 15 years of military training didn't expire with retirement papers. Strategic thinking, tactical expertise, and command presence remained as sharp as ever, waiting for circumstances that demanded their application. She thought about Colonel Hayes and his unmarked interceptors, professional warriors following orders in service of national security. His methods had been aggressive, but his objectives were legitimate: recovery of classified materials that could have threatened American defense systems. Her intervention had forced proper legal procedures while ensuring mission success, proving that constitutional protections and national security could coexist with proper handling. Dr. Holloway's case illustrated civilian good intentions colliding with federal law. His recovery of stolen classified documents had been motivated by patriotism, but his unauthorized possession had created legal complications that required careful resolution. Federal authorities had recognized his cooperation while establishing procedures to prevent similar situations. The young flight attendant, Jennifer, stopped beside her seat. "Commander, Captain Morrison asked me to give you this." She handed Ghost a small envelope with Delta Air Lines logo. Inside, Ghost found a handwritten note. "Ghost, today you demonstrated why military training never truly ends, only transitions to new missions. If you ever want to transition from passenger to aircrew, Delta could use pilots with your expertise and judgment. Captain Morrison." The offer surprised her. Commercial aviation represented complete departure from military flying, but it also offered opportunity to continue serving in different capacity. Protecting civilian passengers, maintaining flight safety, handling emergency situations with calm professionalism, not entirely different from military mission parameters. Her retirement papers were in her carry-on bag, along with job offer from aerospace consulting firm in Denver. Comfortable civilian transition, drawing on military experience without operational responsibility. Safe, predictable, quietly boring after 15 years of tactical flying. But today had reminded her why she'd become a pilot originally. Not for career advancement or financial security, but for the pure joy of commanding complex machines through three-dimensional challenges that demanded split-second decision-making and absolute competence. She looked out the window at afternoon sky that had been battleground 4 hours earlier, now peaceful canvas of clouds and sunlight. Somewhere above, military aircraft patrolled invisible boundaries that protected civilian life against threats most people never imagined. The endless duty of guardianship that never truly ended, only passed from one generation to the next. Ghost pulled out her phone and composed careful text to Phoenix. "Mission complete. Civilians safe, materials secure, constitutional protections maintained. Still got it." The response came immediately. "Never doubted it, Ghost. Welcome back to the fight." 3 weeks later, Ghost stood on the tarmac at Denver International Airport, morning sun painting aircraft in shades of silver and gold. Her new Delta Air Lines uniform felt strange after 15 years of military flight suits, but the familiar weight of captain's insignia carried satisfying authority. Training had been accelerated due to her military background, 6 weeks instead of normal 12 months for civilian pilots transitioning to commercial aviation. Captain Morrison had been her check airman, their professional relationship deepened by shared experience during the intercept incident. He'd pushed her through advanced training scenarios with good-natured ruthlessness, ensuring her tactical instincts adapted to civilian aviation requirements. "Ghost, ready for your first official flight as Delta captain." Morrison approached across the tarmac, his retirement party scheduled for next month. 41 years of commercial flying would end with celebration and gold watch, but his legacy would continue through pilots he'd trained. "Morrison, I'm ready, though it feels strange commanding a Boeing 757 instead of an F-16. He laughed. "Different mission parameters, same core competencies. Keep passengers safe, make good decisions under pressure, maintain professional standards. The skills translate perfectly." Ghost's phone buzzed with text from Phoenix. "Saw the news about your new job. Still flying, still serving, just different uniform. Proud of you, wingman." Today's flight, Delta 1247 from Denver to Seattle, would be routine compared to that afternoon 3 weeks ago when unknown interceptors had tested her tactical judgment. Standard passenger service, normal weather conditions, familiar route structure. But Ghost understood that routine flights were foundation of commercial aviation, just as routine patrols had been foundation of military operations. Her new first officer, a former Navy pilot named Marcus Torch Rodriguez, no relation to the Rodriguez who'd been Morrison's co-pilot, approached with pre-flight paperwork. Captain Akafor, weather looks good for Seattle. Passenger manifest shows 156 souls on board, no special handling requirements. Ghost smiled at the military terminology, souls on board rather than passengers, reflecting shared understanding that each number represented human life entrusted to their professional competence. Torch, let's get them there safely. Walking through the cabin during pre-flight inspection, Ghost noticed passenger demographics had shifted since her viral fame 3 weeks earlier. More families, more elderly travelers, more people who specifically requested flights with the pilot who handled that military situation. Marketing department had been delighted by positive publicity, but Ghost's new reputation had to be earned fresh with every flight. A young girl in seat 14A looked up as Ghost passed. "Are you the Ghost pilot?" Ghost knelt beside her seat, matching the child's eye level. "I'm Captain Akafor. I'll be flying your airplane to Seattle today. My daddy says you saved people from bad guys in the sky." Ghost chose her words carefully. "I helped other pilots handle a complicated situation, but today we're just going to have a nice, safe flight to Seattle. Would you like to see the cockpit before we take off?" The girl's excited nod reminded Ghost why civilian aviation mattered, not for tactical challenges or strategic objectives, but for human connections that brought families together across impossible distances. Every routine flight was a minor miracle of technology and training that made ordinary dreams possible. As she returned to the cockpit, Ghost felt profound satisfaction settling over her like familiar armor. Military service had taught her to protect and serve, but commercial aviation offered different expression of same values. Instead of defending against enemy aircraft, she'd protect civilian passengers against weather, mechanical failure, and human error. Instead of tactical victories, she'd measure success in safe arrivals and satisfied customers. At 35,000 feet above Colorado Rockies, Delta 1247 cruised through crystalline sky while Ghost monitored systems with practiced competence. 3 weeks of intensive training had adapted her tactical instincts to civilian aviation requirements, but core piloting skills remained unchanged. Aircraft control, weather analysis, emergency procedures, fundamental competencies that transcended military and civilian boundaries. Torch handled radio communications with professional efficiency, his Navy background evident in precise phraseology and situational awareness. Working with former military pilots offered comfortable familiarity after years of squadron operations, shared understanding of procedures and standards that civilian-trained aviators sometimes lacked. "Captain, Seattle approach is reporting light chop at lower altitudes, but nothing significant for our arrival," Torch reported, adjusting navigation display for updated weather information. Ghost nodded, noting cloud formations ahead that suggested potential turbulence. Passenger comfort required smooth flight whenever possible, unlike military operations where mission completion trumped creature comforts. Different priorities, but identical commitment to professional excellence. Her phone displayed message from Agent Walsh. "Ghost, thought you'd be interested. Dr. Holloway's recovered materials prevented major technology transfer to foreign interests. His cooperation earned commendation from Secretary of Defense. Sometimes civilian courage makes the difference." Ghost smiled, remembering Holloway's terrified confession in seat 23B 3 weeks earlier. Theoretical physicist thrust into espionage situation had made poor decisions with good intentions, but his ultimate cooperation had served national security interests while avoiding criminal prosecution. Professional resolution that balanced law enforcement objectives with human circumstances. Seattle Center's transmission interrupted her thoughts. Delta 1247, traffic 12 o'clock, 5 miles, military formation of 4 aircraft crossing left to right at flight level 370. Ghost looked up through cockpit windows, spotting familiar contrails against blue sky. 4 aircraft in perfect formation, climbing through altitude bands with military precision. For a moment, muscle memory tensed her shoulders, tactical assessment, threat evaluation, defensive positioning. Then professional training reasserted itself. Routine military training flight, no threat to civilian aviation. Seattle Center, Delta 1247 has the traffic in sight. But something about the formation triggered recognition. Spacing, heading, climb profile, identical to intercept pattern from 3 weeks earlier. She reached for binoculars, studying distant aircraft through magnified optics. Torch noticed her attention. "Captain, something wrong with that military formation." Ghost lowered binoculars, smile spreading across her features. "Torch, unless I'm mistaken, that's Colonel Hayes and his people conducting routine training operations, practicing intercept procedures in controlled airspace instead of harassing civilian aircraft." The lead aircraft waggled its wings slightly, universal aviation greeting between professional pilots. Ghost reached for radio controls, selecting discrete military frequency she'd memorized from their earlier encounter. "Talon Leader, this is Ghost. Nice to see you following proper procedures in controlled airspace." Colonel Hayes' response carried unmistakable humor. "Ghost, heard you joined the airline business. How's civilian flying treating you?" "Colonel, it's remarkably peaceful when unmarked interceptors aren't forcing course deviations." Hayes laughed. "Ghost, that operation taught us valuable lessons about civilian coordination. We're implementing new protocols for similar situations." Ghost understood the subtext. Her insistence on constitutional protections for civilian passengers had influenced military procedures, ensuring future operations balanced national security requirements with legal considerations. Institutional change resulting from individual action, exactly the kind of impact military training was designed to achieve. Talon Leader, glad to hear it. Maintain safe separation from civilian traffic. Copy that, Ghost, and Ghost, good job on that intercept, professional all the way. The recognition from Colonel Hayes carried more weight than official commendations or media attention. Professional warrior acknowledging competence of another professional, respect earned through tactical judgment under pressure rather than ceremonial protocol. Ghost felt profound satisfaction as the military formation disappeared into western sky, their training complete. As Delta 1247 began descent towards Seattle-Tacoma International, Ghost reflected on the strange trajectory that had brought her from mandatory retirement to commercial aviation command. 3 weeks earlier, she'd been questioning her relevance after 15 years of military service. Today, she commanded civilian aircraft with skills that had proven their worth when circumstances demanded tactical expertise. Torch handled approach preparations with competent efficiency, while Ghost monitored weather conditions and runway assignments. Seattle's notorious marine weather layer created challenging conditions for aircraft arrivals, but nothing compared to combat landings in hostile territory. Professional piloting skills adapted to different requirements without losing essential competencies. "Captain, passenger service reports smooth flight with no issues. ETA Seattle on schedule despite our late departure from Denver." Ghost nodded, watching familiar landmarks appear through broken clouds. Puget Sound's complex geography, Mount Rainier's snow-capped majesty, urban sprawl of Seattle metropolitan area, all routine sites for commercial pilots, but still capable of inspiring wonder in former military aviators accustomed to strategic targets rather than civilian destinations. Her phone buzzed with message from Morrison. "Ghost, heard you handled military traffic encounter with characteristic professionalism. Word is spreading through pilot community. Ghost Akaffer brings tactical competence to civilian aviation. Company management is taking notice." Company management attention could mean additional opportunities, training positions, check airman duties, special assignment flights, career advancement in civilian aviation based on military-derived skills that bureaucratic review boards had deemed obsolete, professional vindication through practical demonstration rather than administrative evaluation. But Ghost realized her satisfaction came from simpler source, protecting 156 passengers through professional competence, maintaining safety standards that made routine miracles possible, serving civilian population through skills developed in military service. The mission had changed, but core values remained constant. Seattle Tower cleared them for approach to runway 16L, their instructions crisp and professional. Ghost took control for landing, feeling familiar satisfaction of precise aircraft handling through complex approach procedures. Touchdown was smooth, reverse thrust engagement properly timed, taxi clearance executed with civilian efficiency that matched military standards. As passengers deplaned with casual gratitude for safe arrival, Ghost remained in cockpit completing post-flight documentation. Each routine flight required careful attention to regulatory requirements, maintenance issues, operational procedures, administrative details that ensured systematic safety standards. The young girl from seat 14A appeared at cockpit door with her parents, eyes bright with excitement. "Captain Ghost, thank you for the nice flight. Will you fly us home next week?" Ghost smiled, remembering why civilian aviation mattered beyond tactical challenges or career advancement. "I'll be flying lots of flights, so maybe I'll see you again sometime. Keep watching for airplanes." As the family left, Ghost felt profound contentment settle over her like evening sky. Military service had taught her to protect and serve, but commercial aviation offered daily opportunities to demonstrate those values in civilian context. Every safe flight, every satisfied passenger, every professional standard maintained, individual contributions to larger mission of connecting human communities across impossible distances. 6 months later, Ghost stood before a congressional subcommittee investigating civilian aviation security, her testimony carefully prepared, but delivered with the straightforward honesty that had characterized her military career. The hearing room was packed with media representatives, aviation industry officials, and federal security personnel interested in lessons learned from the Delta 849 incident. "Commander Akaffer," the subcommittee chairman began, "your actions during the aerial intercept of commercial flight raise important questions about coordination between military operations and civilian aviation safety. In your professional opinion, how should such situations be handled in the future?" Ghost looked at the assembled officials, recognizing faces from news coverage and industry publications. Agent Walsh sat in the gallery, along with Captain Morrison and several Delta Air Lines executives. Dr. Holloway occupied a seat near the back, still looking uncomfortable with public attention his case had generated. "Mr. Chairman, the Delta 849 incident demonstrated both strengths and weaknesses in our current security procedures. Military operators showed professional competence in identifying and responding to legitimate security threats. However, their methods created unnecessary risk to civilian passengers by bypassing established coordination protocols." Republican committee member leaned forward. "Commander, are you suggesting military forces should accept delays when national security is at stake?" Ghost had anticipated this question. "Congressman, I'm suggesting that national security and constitutional protections are not mutually exclusive. Professional coordination between military and civilian authorities can achieve security objectives while maintaining legal standards that define American democracy. Democratic member followed up. Commander, your military background obviously influenced your handling of this situation. Should commercial airlines recruit more veterans for civilian aviation positions? Ma'am, military training provides valuable skills for high-pressure situations, but civilian aviation requires specific expertise that goes beyond tactical experience. The key is ensuring that people with relevant backgrounds are available when circumstances demand their capabilities. Ghost noticed Colonel Hayes entering the hearing room, wearing dress uniform with ribbons that spoke of distinguished career in classified operations. His presence suggested official military interest in her testimony, possibly including perspectives that remained classified. The chairman continued, Commander Okafor, some critics argue that your intervention exceeded appropriate authority for retired military personnel. How do you respond to concerns about civilians exercising tactical command during security emergencies? Ghost had wrestled with this question for months, understanding its implications for military-civilian relationships and emergency response procedures. Mr. Chairman, I did not exercise tactical command. I provided consultation to civilian aircrew facing unprecedented circumstances, while ensuring that constitutional protections for passengers were maintained throughout the incident. But she knew the reality was more complex. Her military training and tactical expertise had indeed influenced critical decisions during the aerial intercept, raising questions about authority and responsibility that transcended simple definitions of consultation versus command. Agent Walsh testified next, her professional assessment confirming that Ghost's actions had facilitated successful resolution of legitimate security concerns while preventing potential constitutional violations. Dr. Holloway's subsequent testimony described his perspective as civilian caught between patriotic duty and federal law, his cooperation ultimately serving national security interests. Colonel Hayes testified in closed session, his classified briefing unavailable to public record. But Ghost had learned through informal channels that new military protocols now required coordination with civilian aviation authorities during similar operations. Institutional change resulting from lessons learned during the Delta 849 incident. During recess, Ghost stepped onto Capitol building balcony, looking out over Washington, D.C. skyline while processing the morning's testimony. The hearing had gone well, professional questions, respectful treatment, acknowledgement of her contribution to successful incident resolution. But underlying tensions remained regarding military-civilian coordination during security emergencies. Colonel Hayes approached, his dress uniform impressive with decorations that spoke of career spent protecting national interests through classified operations. Ghost, good testimony in there. Balanced, professional, focused on institutional improvement rather than personal credit. She studied his face, reading professional assessment in his expression. Colonel, I assume you're satisfied with how the Delta 849 incident was ultimately resolved. Hayes nodded. The materials Dr. Holloway recovered prevented major security breach, and your handling of the situation established useful precedents for similar circumstances. Win-win outcome through professional cooperation. Ghost understood that Hayes represented institutional military perspective on her actions, former officer who demonstrated tactical competence while respecting civilian authority and constitutional protections. Template for future incidents requiring military-civilian coordination. Colonel, are you implementing the new coordination protocols we discussed? Affirmative. Military operations involving civilian aircraft now require advance notification to appropriate aviation authorities, with procedures for emergency situations that balance security requirements with passenger safety. Hayes paused, studying her expression. Your recommendations were incorporated into official doctrine. Ghost felt satisfaction beyond personal vindication. Military institutions adapting procedures based on lessons learned during real-world operations. Exactly the kind of institutional learning that made democratic military forces effective, while remaining accountable to civilian authority. Agent Walsh joined them on the balcony, her FBI credentials reflecting federal law enforcement perspective on the incident. Ghost, good testimony today. Congress needed to hear professional assessment of coordination issues. The three of them, military officer, federal agent, commercial pilot, represented different aspects of national security apparatus that had converged during the Delta 849 incident. Their cooperation had resolved immediate crisis while establishing precedents for future situations requiring interagency coordination. Agent Walsh, has Dr. Holloway's cooperation helped with the broader investigation into classified materials theft? Walsh nodded. His information led to recovery of additional stolen documents and prosecution of the original thieves. Turns out his amateur recovery operation prevented much larger security compromise. Ghost smiled, remembering Holloway's terrified confession in Seat 23B 6 months earlier. Civilian physicist thrust into espionage situation had made questionable decisions with patriotic motives, but his ultimate cooperation had served national security while earning official recognition rather than criminal prosecution. As afternoon hearings resumed, Ghost reflected on the strange trajectory that had brought her from mandatory retirement to congressional testimony. 6 months earlier, she'd been questioning her relevance after 15 years of military service. Today, her experience influenced national security doctrine, while her commercial aviation career demonstrated continued service in civilian context. The hearing concluded with unanimous subcommittee recommendation for improved coordination protocols between military security operations and civilian aviation authorities. Ghost's testimony had contributed to bipartisan recognition that constitutional protections and national security could coexist through professional cooperation and institutional adaptation. 1 year after the Delta 849 incident, Ghost sat in the captain's seat of a Boeing 777 approaching London Heathrow, commanding her first international flight as Delta's newest check airman. The promotion had come with recognition of her unique qualifications, tactical experience that enhanced civilian aviation safety, leadership skills proven under pressure, and professional judgment that balanced competing priorities with consistent competence. Her first officer was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Phoenix Martinez, recently retired from the Air Force and transitioning to commercial aviation through Delta's military recruitment program. Having Ghost as check airman provided Phoenix with familiar military perspectives adapted to civilian aviation requirements. Captain, London Control is reporting moderate turbulence at lower altitudes, but weather should improve by our arrival time, Phoenix reported, monitoring atmospheric conditions with situational awareness that reflected military training. Ghost nodded, studying weather radar displays that showed typical Atlantic weather patterns. International flying offered different challenges from domestic routes, longer flights, complex airspace coordination, diverse passenger demographics, but fundamental piloting skills remained unchanged. Phoenix, how are you adapting to civilian aviation after military service? Her former wingman smiled. It's different, Ghost. Mission parameters are passenger comfort instead of tactical objectives, but the core competencies translate perfectly, and having you as check airman makes the transition much smoother. Ghost felt satisfaction in mentoring former military pilots through civilian aviation careers. Delta's recruitment program had expanded significantly after publicity surrounding the Delta 849 incident, recognizing that military-trained aviators brought valuable skills to commercial operations. Professional expertise in high-pressure situations, systematic approach to emergency procedures, leadership experience under stress, capabilities that enhanced civilian aviation safety while providing career opportunities for transitioning veterans. Her phone displayed message from Agent Walsh. Ghost, first anniversary of Delta 849 incident. Dr. Holloway sends regards from his new position at National Security Agency. Apparently his cooperation earned him official recognition and security clearance. Full circle resolution. Ghost smiled, remembering Holloway's transformation from terrified physicist to recognized security asset. His amateur recovery of stolen classified materials had created immediate crisis, but his cooperation with federal authorities had prevented larger security compromise while earning him legitimate role in national defense apparatus. London Heathrow appeared through broken clouds, one of world's busiest airports handling international traffic with complex precision. Ghost took control for approach, feeling familiar satisfaction of precise aircraft handling through challenging weather conditions. Her passengers, business travelers, tourists, families, trusted their lives to professional competence they'd never see, routine miracle of international aviation that connected human communities across impossible distances. As they touched down on runway 27L, Ghost reflected on the year since she'd awakened in Seat 12C to find herself thrust into aerial crisis that would define her post-military career. Tactical expertise developed through 15 years of military service had proven its worth in civilian context, while commercial aviation offered daily opportunities to serve through professional competence rather than combat operations. Phoenix handled post-flight procedures with military efficiency adapted to civilian requirements, her transition from tactical fighter to commercial transport progressing smoothly under Ghost's mentorship. The cycle of military service transitioning to civilian contribution continued, each generation passing experience to the next while adapting to changing circumstances. That evening, Ghost walked through London streets thinking about paths not taken and missions accomplished. Mandatory retirement from military service had seemed like ending, but it had actually been transitioned to different form of service with broader impact on civilian population. 5 years after the Delta 849 incident, Captain Zara Ghost Okafor stood before a gathering of Delta Airlines pilots at their annual safety conference, her keynote address focusing on lessons learned from military-civilian coordination during aviation emergencies. The audience included pilots from diverse backgrounds, former military aviators, civilian-trained professionals, international personnel on exchange programs, united by shared commitment to aviation safety. The Delta 849 incident taught us that crisis situations require flexible thinking within established procedures, Ghost explained. Her presentation illustrated with tactical diagrams and regulatory references. Military training provides valuable decision-making frameworks, but civilian aviation demands broader considerations including passenger comfort, regulatory compliance, and public relations impact. The audience listened with professional attention, many taking notes on coordination procedures and emergency decision-making processes. Ghost's reputation had grown beyond the original incident. Her expertise sought by airlines, government agencies, and military organizations interested in improving interagency cooperation during security emergencies. Dr. Marcus Holloway sat in the front row, his transformation from terrified physicist to NSA security consultant complete. His experience had led to improved protocols for handling classified materials discovered outside official channels, preventing similar situations from creating unnecessary security crises. His presence at aviation safety conferences reflected recognition that civilian experts could contribute to national security through professional cooperation rather than amateur heroics. Agent Walsh occupied a seat near the back. Her FBI career, enhanced by expertise in aviation security matters, developed during the Delta 849 investigation. She now led federal task force responsible for coordinating between military operations and civilian aviation authorities. Institutional position created partly in response to lessons learned from Ghost's handling of aerial intercept. Colonel Hayes had retired from active duty, but remained involved in classified consulting work that Ghost suspected included development of improved military protocols for civilian aircraft interactions. His professional assessment of her tactical judgment had influenced military doctrine regarding constitutional protections during security operations. During the question period, a young pilot raised her hand. "Captain Okafor, how do you balance military tactical thinking with civilian safety priorities?" Ghost considered the question carefully, recognizing its importance for military veterans transitioning to commercial aviation. The core principle is identical: protect people through professional competence. Military operations focus on tactical objectives, while civilian aviation prioritizes passenger safety, but both require systematic decision-making under pressure. Another pilot asked, "Captain, do you think airlines should actively recruit military veterans?" Military training provides valuable skills, but civilian aviation requires specific expertise that goes beyond tactical experience. The key is matching individual capabilities with operational requirements while ensuring proper training for civilian procedures and standards. After the presentation, Ghost mingled with attendees, answering questions and sharing experiences with pilots facing similar transitions from military to civilian service. Her story had become template for successful career adaptation, demonstration that military expertise could enhance civilian operations while serving broader social purposes. Phoenix approached, now a captain herself and Czech airman specializing in military veteran integration. "Ghost, excellent presentation. The coordination procedures you developed are becoming industry standard." Ghost felt pride in systematic improvement rather than personal recognition. The Delta 849 incident had catalyzed changes that enhanced aviation safety while improving military-civilian cooperation, institutional benefits that extended far beyond individual career advancement. As the conference concluded, Ghost walked through hotel corridors thinking about legacy and continued service. Military career had provided foundation skills, but civilian aviation offered daily opportunities to protect and serve through different mission parameters. Every safe flight, every successful emergency response, every professional standard maintained, individual contributions to larger purpose of connecting human communities while maintaining security and constitutional protections. On a clear morning 10 years after the Delta 849 incident, Ghost sat in the cockpit of Delta's newest Boeing 787 Dreamliner, preparing for her final flight before mandatory retirement from commercial aviation. Her career had spanned military tactical fighters and civilian wide-body transports, combat missions and routine passenger service, tactical command and commercial leadership. Today's flight from Atlanta to Los Angeles would conclude 30 years of professional flying. Her first officer was Captain Lisa "Viper" Thompson, former Navy pilot who joined Delta through the military recruitment program Ghost had helped establish. The mentorship cycle continued, experienced aviators passing knowledge to the next generation while adapting to technological and procedural evolution that defined modern aviation. "Captain Okafor, it's an honor flying with you on your retirement flight," Viper said, completing pre-flight checklist with precision that reflected military training adapted to civilian requirements. "Your legacy in both military and commercial aviation has inspired a generation of pilots." Ghost smiled, studying advanced cockpit displays that would have seemed like science fiction during her early military career. Technology had evolved dramatically, but fundamental piloting skills remained unchanged: aircraft control, situational awareness, decision-making under pressure, professional competence in service of larger mission. Viper, the honor is mine. Watching military pilots successfully transition to commercial aviation has been one of my greatest professional satisfactions. Atlanta's departure procedures were routine despite morning traffic complexity. Ghost's 15,000 hours of commercial flying experience evident in smooth aircraft handling and efficient communication with air traffic control. But she found herself remembering her first day as airline captain, uncertainty about adapting military skills to civilian requirements, doubt about her relevance after mandatory military retirement. The Boeing 787 climbed through morning sky above Georgia landscape, its advanced systems monitoring atmospheric conditions and optimizing fuel consumption with computer precision that enhanced human decision-making rather than replacing it. Ghost appreciated technological evolution that made flying safer while maintaining pilot authority over critical decisions. Her phone displayed congratulatory messages from colleagues around the world, military pilots she'd served with, commercial aviators she'd trained, federal agents and military officials who'd worked with her on security coordination protocols. The network of professional relationships built over 3 decades of service, each connection representing shared commitment to protection and service. Agent Walsh had sent personal note. Ghost, your influence on military-civilian coordination during security emergencies has enhanced national security while protecting constitutional rights. The protocols you helped develop are now standard procedure for federal agencies. Thank you for showing us that professional competence and democratic values can coexist. Colonel Hayes, now retired but still consulting on classified projects, had written, Ghost, your tactical judgment during the Delta 849 incident influenced military doctrine regarding civilian protection during security operations. Professional warrior serving broader purposes, exactly what military training is designed to achieve. Dr. Holloway, now senior NSA analyst specializing in classified materials security, had messaged, Commander, our chance encounter led to career change I never expected, but your professional handling of impossible situation taught me that civilian courage can serve national security when properly channeled. Thank you for seeing potential instead of problems. As the 787 cruised at 41,000 feet above American landscape, Ghost reflected on the unexpected trajectory that had defined her post-military career. What had begun as routine passenger flight had become a defining moment that influenced national security doctrine, aviation safety procedures, and individual career paths for dozens of people whose lives had intersected during those tense hours. Los Angeles International Airport appeared through California haze as Ghost began her final descent as commercial airline captain, 30 years of professional flying concluding where it had begun, serving others through technical competence and professional dedication. The irony wasn't lost on her that her most significant contribution had occurred not through planned military operations, but during accidental intersection of civilian aviation and national security requirements. Viper handled approach communications while Ghost flew the aircraft manually, preferring hands-on control for this symbolic conclusion to her flying career. The Boeing 787's advanced systems provided information and assistance, but ultimate responsibility remained with human decision-making that balanced multiple priorities: passenger safety, operational efficiency, regulatory compliance, professional standards. Captain, Los Angeles Tower clears us to land runway 24R, wind light and variable, visibility 10 miles. Viper's transmission reflected military precision adapted to civilian aviation protocols, continuing evolution of professional expertise across service boundaries. Ghost acknowledged the clearance and configured the aircraft for landing, feeling familiar satisfaction of precise flight control during complex approach procedures. 30 years of similar approaches, military tactical fighters landing on aircraft carriers, commercial transports arriving at international airports, each requiring identical core competencies applied to different mission parameters. The touchdown was smooth despite emotional weight of final landing, reverse thrust, and taxi procedures executed with professional efficiency that made routine operations appear effortless. Ghost's passengers would deplane without realizing they'd witnessed conclusion of distinguished aviation career, their casual gratitude testament to successful completion of transportation service they'd purchased rather than historic moment they'd unknowingly shared. As passengers deplaned at LAX, several recognized Ghost from media coverage of her retirement. A businessman stopped to shake her hand. "Captain Akaffer, thank you for your service, both military and commercial. You've made flying safer for all of us." A family with young children waited at the cockpit door, their daughter carrying hand-drawn picture of airplane with "Thank you, Captain Ghost" written in crayon. "Ma'am, we wanted you to have this for your retirement," the mother said. "Our daughter has been following your story since she was little." Ghost accepted the drawing with genuine emotion, remembering similar moments throughout her commercial career when passengers had connected personally with professional service she'd provided. Aviation's human dimension that transcended technical procedures and regulatory requirements, individual relationships that made systematic service meaningful. Delta's chief pilot waited at the gate with retirement ceremony that honored 30 years of professional contribution to commercial aviation safety. Colleagues from across the airline industry attended, their presence testimony to Ghost's influence on military veteran integration, emergency response procedures, and professional standards that enhanced civilian aviation security. "Captain Akaffer," the chief pilot announced, "your career exemplifies the highest standards of professional aviation. From military tactical command to commercial airline leadership, you've demonstrated that service continues beyond uniform changes. It adapts to new missions while maintaining core values of protection and dedication." As evening settled over Los Angeles, Ghost walked through terminal corridors one final time as active airline captain, her career spanning 3 decades of technological evolution and procedural advancement. But constant throughout had been fundamental purpose, protecting people through professional competence.